Episode 11, part 2. Iran.
I ran so far away.
I ran so far away. Seen him in
I
concert
couldn't get
tour.
away.
Yeah, I've seen him in concert tour 3 times now. Anyways, but that's not what we're talking about. Illegal war and people who don't understand what the media should be doing. And well, we haven't had a chance to really discuss this before, but so let me just say a few of my thoughts. You've heard me say this because I've made videos about it. Okay, point number one, obviously, is he did this without any congressional oversight, any congressional approval, and that alone is like practically criminal. Well, it is kind of criminal. But point number two, Iran didn't do anything to us. Iran is not and was not a threat and did not do anything to the United States. And we were already doing more than we probably should have been in terms of funding Israel. And so there was no logical reason for us to go in. And then point number three, and then I'll hand it back to Steve, is what bothers me about the way the media is repeating the message from the Trump campaign people is that they're not being critical of it because the message doesn't make any sense. They keep saying, we had these targets that were this, and we hit them, and then here's the last funny part, but there's no need to worry about nuclear fallout. Well, if you hit something that was what you thought you were worried about, there would be nuclear fallout. So you didn't hit what you said you did, which probably means that they didn't have it, which probably means there was no reason to go in there. Come on, you just...
Yeah, so I'm going to take it back. I'm going to take it way back.
Okay.
So why is Iran even a problem with the United States? Well, let's take it back to 1948. When we backed the Zionists and helped them kick out 700,000 Palestinians off the bat, maybe 1 million, pushed them into Jordan next door. And said, okay, now this is the new Palestine. This is where you belong now. And literally they said, well, that's their land. And, and this whole narrative that, this was always Israel, which did not exist prior to 1948. There was some Jewish people living there, but they coexisted with a lot of other, people. And, they just booted everybody out and they just moved the hell in. And then ever since then, they've been disingenuous and everything. And of course, their narrative always is, well, they want to destroy us and they're just not being fair. And it's like, if you just dissect all the different agreements they did and how they broke them along the way. And if you even listen to Eisenhower back in the 50s, he's like, well, I got a bunch of heat from the Arabs because, this and that, but I couldn't, just expel 3 million off the bat, so we're just going to start with 1 million. Listen to this stuff from the 50s, and you go back and you're like, oh, yeah, you start to see what happened there. Basically, it's just neocolonialism. It's the same thing that happened in the U.S. They just pushed everybody out, and they continue to do it. So then, it's like, oh, they keep on getting attacked. Israel keeps getting attacked. Yeah, once again, this is reactive abuse. Is it warranted to do some of this bad, like some of the crazy shit that happens? Like, I'm not a fan of any of that religious fanaticism, and that's what this all boils down to. What gives these people the right to a piece of land based off a book written 2,500 fucking years ago or whatever, of fairy tales, a bullshit lie, like nonsense? And having that as like one of your main factors in why you should establish this state, and also based on the persecution that you endured in World War II. Yeah, that was a tragedy. But in my position on all this is, if you use that as an excuse to do what you're doing, you're freaking a reprehensible human being. That's disgusting. You're trying to use your persecution as a reason to persecute others, and I don't see anything worse than that. So that's what's going on. Because anytime anybody criticizes what's happening, they're going to be called anti-Semitic, and you can't equate the two. It's ridiculous. So if you're just trying to be a humanitarian, like I said, I have no love for any of these fanatic religious crazed people. It's what makes them believe that they can just be barbaric towards each other. But let's just get down to the to like the pragmatic, like, okay, what do we do now? Because we did help them. We should never have. If they wanted to set up a state, go to Arizona. Like, what? No, seriously, there were talks about that. Like, how the Mormons did.
Oh, yeah, with Utah.
Yeah, there were seriously talks like that.
Okay.
And and I can see some of the reasoning, like, hey, we're not welcome anywhere. And if they were welcome in anywhere, they could have done it anywhere. But you're certainly not welcome in Jerusalem. And because you have this old fucking fairy tale book that tells you are, to the exclusion of everyone else in the world, and you're like, they talk about like this and that and the other. You just exclusionary. Your religion says that I'm going to hell. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're the chosen one, and nobody else matters. How narcissistic and crazed is that?
How much does that not sound like the mustache man?
Right. Like, so when you have this ideology backing your thought processes, of course you're going to justify what you're doing, and then if somebody retaliates, you're going to call them the barbaric,
barbaric, yeah.
Right, and all they're doing is reacting to your abuse. So, so that's where this starts. But then if you go back to I looked this up again, 53, there was a coup d'etat. Prime Minister Mohammed Mossadegh, I believe is how you pronounce it, was overthrown because he wanted to nationalize the oil in Iran. And we're like, no, you can't do that. We need that. We need that money. So they're just like the capitalists. So this all starts back there in Iraq and all this stuff, right? So let's just fast forward to 1989 or whatever, and then you have Bush and his war, because once again, and we backed Saddam Hussein.
The first Bush.
Yeah, the first Bush, and we backed Saddam Hussein in the beginning because he was our puppet. Just like Noriega in Panama and all this.
And then,
but then he got out of control.
And then the second war,
and he wanted to nationalize, and he wanted to do some things with the U.S. currency and sell things, and then he went into Kuwait, sort of, and then we used, he sort of threatened, that possibly he's going into Saudi Arabia next, is what the thoughts might have been. We backed him against Iran because we didn't like Iran. He was kind of our guy at the time when we backed him against Iran. But let me go to 53. So that's why they were pissed, because we went in there and overthrew their democratic elected president. And the backlash to that was the Shah, which what happened was we put in the Shah, and he was just a fucking horrible human being. He fucked these people up, right? So the backlash to that was they put in, these crazed, because like any situation in any country, when things get horrible, usually what happens is people go fanatical. So, in a case like that, they want religious fanaticism. They wanted to get some stability that they thought like the mustache man could do, or like Mussolini could do when things are just going to hell in a handbasket like they were in the 30s. But in Russia, when the Tsar in the prior to this, the backlash was sort of what was supposed to be socialism and communism. But once again, it was these crazed, tyrannical megalomaniacs. Some of the early ones weren't as bad, but they got booted out. Like Trotsky and these dudes that had some decent thoughts were just kicked the hell out and murdered later on. But and even Lenin wasn't nearly as bad as Stalin. But I mean, this was the thing, is you get these guys in power when these vacuums occur because of all this craziness that capitalism and monarchies and oligarchs cause. And then the backlash is in retaliation, they just replace, read 1984. So they just replace, just as bad as what they started with. And we don't want to do that, what's happening here, but you don't want to have some kind of violent revolution where you just throw in another, situation where, I mean, I don't know how bad this, Fidel Castro is as far as trying to equate the two, but you get my point, I guess, if you're following me here. So what happens at the Shah, and then, and then it gets followed up by, they put in these religious, crazy people in there. So now we have this beef with them, right? Because now we've been in trouble with them since that time. And this, back in when this happened with Saddam, all this political stuff, what was the thing? Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction. They got this. They got that. But
then, since we're talking about Iran, point out what Obama did.
Which time?
Well, with the agreement. The
Okay, so we could go into all these agreements, right?
Okay.
But let's just I just want to.
Okay.
Look, I would have to read up on this to give you all the straight up facts, but it's always something about we make these agreements with them, and then they follow the agreement. But then when something happens in the politically or geopolitically that we don't like, then we say they broke it. We make up some bullshit to go bomb them. Even though they followed the fucking instructions we told them to do every single time, and we fuck them up, it's because something else happened.
But you mentioned 1984, and I bring that up because
89?
Well, no, 1984, the book.
No.
Well,
Animal Farm.
Well, either one. Because, anyways, what double speak is what I was going for, because that's what Trump has been doing.
If I said I meant Animal Farm, where they just replaced one with the other.
Yeah. But the point being is, like, in the last, I guess, just week, you know, he did this whole thing of saying, "Oh, I instituted a ceasefire." Well, they were still shooting at each other, and you were the one that attacked. So how does you trying to insist on a ceasefire make any sense whatsoever? Like, that's garbage. That, like, words have to mean something, dude. Like,
right. So, yeah. So just making bullshit up.
Yeah.
You know, the weapons of mass destruction, and then once again, they got. These guys, Netanyahu's been saying that these guys had this close to a nuclear bomb for.
Yeah, but they've been saying that for decades. I mean, yeah.
They're always this close. Whenever they have an excuse that's like, "Oh, they were this close."
Oh, and then the most obnoxious bit is most recently, Trump was blaming the pilots. He was saying, "Oh, well, it's the pilots' fault." Blah blah blah. The pilots did exactly whatever they were told. I have no question about what the pilots did. They did their job. Okay. Now, if they didn't do what you thought they were going to do or what you wanted them to do, that's your fault.
What did he want them to do?
That's the problem. Honestly, not that he would ever admit it, but the only logical reason for him to do what he did is to distract from things going on here in the States.
Well,
I mean, there isn't in that region what he did doesn't make any sense. We're not going to acquire the oil. We already have enough oil. There's nothing makes sense.
Let's go to 1984, and you're talking about this double speak, right?
Yeah.
So we attack. They call it a preemptive strike, which literally means we attack the country.
Right.
Because we thought maybe they might do something. Like, who's the nuclear threat in the region?
Yeah,
Israel.
As I pointed out, who is the only country ever that has actually used nukes?
Right.
Oh yeah.
If you go outside of America, which makes up like what? 400, let's say 500 million people. I just toss a fucking number out there. Who knows today? I don't know. 350 to 455, according to the census. Compared to like what, 7-8 billion now? You know, these numbers seem to change a lot. But we just but our attitude is the whole world is like dangerous. But you go anywhere else in the world, guess who they point out as the most dangerous fucking people on earth? The United States. The United fucking States is the most dangerous people on earth. So yeah, what the fuck is going on? It's once again, it goes back to this narcissism, this egocentric attitude that everybody else is dangerous.
Well, because we're
heroes. We're going to democratize people.
Yeah, we're not only the best equipped, which we are, in size of army, nukes, etc., however you want to look at it, but we're also the ones who have our bases on everywhere that we can possibly get away with it. Have our intelligence everywhere that we can stick our nose in, are literally doing more than any other country to like I said, weasel in and affect change everywhere we can think of.
Look, man, if you want to like really like, I'm just giving you some, just tossing shit out of my head. I don't have all these fucking names and facts and shit. Look them up though. Like if you're watching this, just look this shit up. Look, there's a historian on TikTok that does this stuff, and he's brilliant with this crap. I'm a moron when it comes to this shit, but. You know, I'm trying to get you in the right direction. Go look at this stuff from people who know what they're talking about. If you're not going to listen to me,
well, you don't have things wrong. You just don't have all the details.
I don't have all the details,
yeah.
But I'm just giving you like the broad thing, and maybe I'm getting some shit wrong. I don't know, some dates, whatever. But that's not the fucking point. The point is, this is bullshit. Yeah. You're reversing shit and making shit up, and like making something into what it's not, as usual. Like all these capitalist fucking pigs do, and these colonialists. So I mean, basically, what I'm trying to say is. Israel's nothing more than neocolonialism. It was backed in the beginning. Look, if it had anything to do with like helping Jewish people, like why didn't we do that? That was after the fact that we said that was the reason we went to that war. You know, because we turned.
And we didn't even realize a lot of what was going on until we started to help them, and then discovered some of the camps and stuff.
Yeah, and some people knew and just said.
Well, some did.
Look, they knew, but guess what? They didn't tell the soldiers. You know why? Because they're like, a lot of them aren't going to care.
Well, no. My point is, some of the Germans knew. Most of the Americans didn't know. Is my point.
The intelligence officials knew.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I was watching these documentaries on this, and a lot of these guys knew. You know, FDR knew before, and they were even talking about should we bomb some of these places to, stop this massacres and stuff. You know, we might take out some of them, but we'll stop, future ones. It was like, there was some thoughts about that going on. So yeah, but did they tell no, not until after, there was some more propaganda stuff showing like, what Hitler was doing and some things like that. But for the most part, prior to the lead up until the very end, that wasn't really part of the issue. Certainly fascism was, but yeah, I don't think that was like the main crust of like why we were doing this, in Germany. That it became afterwards.
If it was, we would have gotten involved earlier.
Much earlier.
Yeah.
In the 30s.
Right.
When FDR wanted to. But we went through this before in one of the episodes. I told you, the industrialists didn't want FDR. They tried to kick him out. They were backing Hitler and Stalin. They didn't like Stalin. They didn't want Stalin to win. But when that war was over almost, and we decided to go in and Germany declared war on us, that's when they stopped. Look, let's put it this way. If Russia wasn't winning that war, didn't win that war for us before we even fucking got in there, or basically get most of that war finished up, we would have been fascists today. Like,
we might all be speaking German.
Well, I don't think we'd be speaking German,
yeah,
but we'd be a fascist country.
Point, yes.
We're pretty fucking fascist already, or at least oligarchical. I mean, very close. But and people don't recognize that either. Maybe that's another discussion we'll have, because you and I were talking about this earlier, about how people have this misconception of this democracy that we live in, about how democratic it actually is. And how
democratic it should be. That was a weird thing starting about a year ago, where people actually started to say that we were too democratic. I had never heard that before. I mean, in this country.
Yeah, we're too democratic. And they don't want socialism only if it goes to the rich. Yeah, that's called fascism.
Yeah.
So, socialism's bad, communism's bad. Oh, look what happened in New York. This is so bad. They're going to be communists. What do you call giving billions and billions of dollars in tax breaks and money to billionaires? Because all the social welfare is going to billionaires. Now, if you give it to the people, you'd call it socialism, and it's horrible. But if you give it to billionaires, that's called democracy? That's called capitalism? No, that's fascism.
And they're not even doing it on merit or whatever. It's like, oh, whoever's our buddy. I mean, yeah.
Right, it's fascism. That's not communism. So, anyways. Oh, God. We're going off the rails again.
But
back to this Iranian.
Yeah, bottom line, makes no sense. The verbiage from Trump about it makes no sense. But the pushback against it is surprisingly small. I mean, within the government itself. I mean, sure, there are people in the streets, but I mean, the actual politicians pushing back on it are not pushing back as hard as you would expect. I mean,
look, I told you, these neoliberals, man. Obama, I mean, he was in bed with these capitalists, and he was placating to them. He was not a progressive. I've told everybody this before. He was never a progressive. Clinton certainly wasn't a progressive. I mean, some of these attitudes they might have socially are somewhat progressive, but when it comes to economic issues and some of this other stuff and the bank bailouts and everything, and when it comes, especially when it comes to foreign, interventions in politics. I mean, what do they call them instead of Obama? Drone.
Oh,
drone.
I don't remember the term, but I know what the.
Because he's dropping drones.
Yeah.
Dropping bombs.
Well, we're getting way off with this next comment, so we should probably just wrap it up in a second. But going back to the immigration, just for 1 second, what's funny is that if you look at the numbers, Obama and Biden both were deporting much larger numbers of people. It's not a question of deporting people; it's a question of how they're doing it and who they're targeting. And from that point of view, they're doing two completely different things than what Trump is doing right now. Trump is literally racial profiling people who might not even be illegal.
We're talk about that.
Yeah. Well, so but what was my point with that? Just that I'm not trying to give Obama or Clinton or any of these guys a pass, but compared to, I'm not going to. Just keep it simple. Compared to Trump, they were, by comparison, still Democratic, still almost progressive, whatever, versus, yes, the right has been increasingly fascist, but Trump took it over the line and he just is fascist. There's no fascist light or semi-fascist or whatever, he just is.
It's just fascist at this point. So, any preconceived notions that this thing with Iran has anything to do with Iranian threat to America because of nuclear weapons, and somehow that's going to, bleed into us, is absolute nonsense.